The night Kang Min-Jae decided to take another woman to the most important banquet of his life. He believed he was making the smartest decision he had ever made. He believed the woman beside him would make people respect him more. He believed the cameras would flash brighter. He believed powerful men would envy him. And most importantly, he believed his wife would stay exactly where he had left her, hidden. 3 hours later, that belief would be destroyed in front of hundreds of people, because the woman Min-Jae had spent years trying to make invisible, would walk into the most prestigious ballroom in Seoul and become the only person anyone could see. But before that happened, there was a mansion, a marriage, and a woman who had finally reached the end of her patience. Rain tapped against the enormous windows of the Kang estate. It was almost 7 in the evening. The mansion was unusually quiet. Staff members moved quickly through the corridors, carrying garment bags, jewelry boxes, perfume bottles, and expensive accessories. Tonight was not an ordinary night. Tonight was the annual Seoul Elite Foundation Banquet. It was the one night each year when Korea's wealthiest families gathered under one roof. Business leaders, political figures, celebrities, heirs, foreign investors, and, unofficially, men whose names never appeared in newspapers but whose influence could destroy entire companies overnight. For Kang Min-Jae, the banquet was more than a social event. It was a battlefield. Every handshake mattered. Every photograph mattered. Every person standing beside him mattered. And tonight, he intended to make an impression. In the master bedroom, Min-Jae stood in front of a full-length mirror. He adjusted his black cufflinks. His suit had been custom-made in Milan. The fabric fit perfectly over his broad shoulders. Before we continue, subscribe, because the secret this African made is about to uncover inside the Mafia boss's mansion will change everything. His black shirt was buttoned almost completely, leaving only the top button undone. His expensive watch rested against his tattooed wrist. His reflection looked exactly the way the newspapers described him. Cold, untouchable, dangerous. Kang Min-Jae was 36 years old, but men twice his age lowered their voices when speaking to him. His pale Korean complexion, sharp jawline, and high cheekbones gave him an intimidating appearance even when he was silent. His dark eyes were naturally cold. His black hair was styled neatly, with a slight textured part that made him look more like a powerful businessman than the feared leader he really was. But beneath the collar of his shirt was something that reminded everyone who knew him personally that he was not an ordinary businessman. A massive black dragon tattoo curled from behind his left ear and traveled down the side of his neck. His hands and wrists were covered in intricate black and gray tattoos. They weren't decorative. They were part of him. A permanent reminder of a life he had lived before becoming Seoul's most powerful young businessman. Min-Jae looked at his watch, then at the bedroom door. He frowned. She's still not ready? His assistant, Mr. Han, stood several feet away. The older man glanced down at his tablet. Sir, Min-Jae's eyes narrowed. What? Your wife said she isn't attending tonight. Silence. The rain outside suddenly seemed louder. Min-Jae slowly turned away from the mirror. What did you say? Mrs. Kang said she isn't attending the banquet. Min-Jae stared at him, then let out a quiet laugh. There was no humor in it. Of course she isn't. Mr. Han hesitated. Should I speak with her? No. Min-Jae turned back toward the mirror. Let her stay here. Sir, the press has been asking about. I know what the press has been asking. His voice became colder. They don't need to see her. Mr. Han lowered his head. Yes, sir. Min-Jae picked up his watch. But before putting it on, his eyes fell on something sitting beside the mirror. A photograph. He paused. It was an old wedding photograph. 3 years old. In it, Amara stood beside him wearing a simple ivory wedding dress. Her natural curls were gathered behind her head. She wasn't wearing expensive jewelry. There were no diamonds, no designer accessories, just a small silver cross around her neck. And she was smiling. Not the carefully rehearsed smile of a socialite. Not the polished smile of someone who had spent years learning how to pose for cameras. It was genuine, warm, happy. Min-Jae remembered that day. He remembered the way she had looked at him when they exchanged vows. He remembered what he had promised her. I will never make you feel like you're less than anyone. His fingers tightened around the watch. For a moment, something uncomfortable moved through his chest. Regret. But he quickly pushed it away. 3 years had passed. People changed. Marriage changed. He had changed. And so had she. Min-Jae placed the watch around his wrist. Then he turned to Mr. Han. Get Elena. The assistant looked up. The model? Min-Jae's expression didn't change. Yes. Mr. Han hesitated. Sir, Elena Park? Min-Jae's eyes sharpened. How many Elenas do you think I know? No, sir. I just call her. Mr. Han nodded. Yes, sir. He stepped out of the room. The door closed. Min-Jae was alone. He looked at the wedding photograph one more time. Then he turned it face down. Across the mansion, Amara sat silently in her bedroom. She had heard everything. She had heard Mr. Han walking down the hallway. She had heard Min-Jae's voice. She had heard the name Elena. And she had understood immediately. He was bringing another woman to the banquet, in her place. Amara sat before her vanity mirror without moving. Her reflection stared back at her. For 3 years, she had wondered what was wrong with her. Was she not beautiful enough? Was she not elegant enough? Was her African heritage the reason? Was her natural hair the reason? Was it because she didn't come from a wealthy Korean family? Or maybe she simply wasn't the kind of woman Min-Jae wanted. She had never asked him those questions aloud, because she already knew what his silence meant. Amara was 27. She had deep ebony brown skin, expressive dark eyes, full lips, and naturally curly black hair. She had never hated those things about herself, until she married Min-Jae. Then slowly, she began changing. She started straightening her hair, because he once casually mentioned that his former girlfriends always wore their hair sleek. She stopped wearing bright colors because he told her they looked childish. She learned how to use expensive makeup. She learned which restaurants his friends liked. She learned which forks to use at formal dinners. She learned how to speak less, laugh less, move less, exist less. Because every time she became herself, Min-Jae seemed embarrassed. Once, at a dinner with several wealthy families, one of his friends had asked him, Min-Jae, where did you find your wife? Everyone had laughed. Min-Jae hadn't defended her. He had simply smiled and changed the subject. Amara had never forgotten that. She touched the silver cross around her neck. It was the only piece of jewelry she wore every day. Her grandmother had given it to her before she died. Her grandmother had always told her, never make yourself smaller just because someone else is uncomfortable with your light. Amara had spent 3 years ignoring those words. Tonight, she finally remembered them. A knock came at the door. Amara didn't answer. The door opened slightly. One of the housemaids looked inside. Mrs. Kang. Amara turned. Yes. The car for you is ready if you want to go to the banquet. Amara smiled faintly. Thank you. The maid hesitated. Are you going? Amara looked at herself in the mirror. For several seconds, she didn't answer. Then she shook her head. No. The maid nodded and began closing the door. But before she left, Amara asked, Did Mr. Kang say anything about me? The maid froze. She didn't answer. Amara smiled sadly. Never mind. The door closed. Amara lowered her eyes. She had her answer. 20 minutes later, high heels echoed through the mansion. Click, click, click. Amara looked toward the hallway. She didn't need to see the woman. She already knew. Elena Park entered the master suite wearing a shimmering black gown. She was 28, tall, elegant, beautiful, a famous Korean fashion model whose face appeared on billboards throughout Seoul. Her long black hair fell perfectly over one shoulder. Her makeup was flawless. Diamonds glittered from her ears. She stopped when she saw Amara. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Elena smiled. Not warmly, politely. I suppose you're Mrs. Kang. Amara stood. Yes. Elena looked her over. Her gaze lingered on Amara's simple cardigan, then her natural hair, then her modest necklace. I've heard about you. Amara's expression remained calm. Have you? Of course. Elena smiled. Everyone has. There was something in her voice. Something sharp. Amara understood immediately. You should probably go downstairs, Amara said. Elena tilted her head. Min-Jae asked me to come upstairs. Amara's heart tightened. but she refused to show it. Then he must be waiting. Elena smiled. He is. A moment passed. Then Elena leaned closer. Don't worry. Amara looked at her. About what? Elena's smile became slightly wider. I won't embarrass him tonight. Then she walked away. Amara stood completely still. A few seconds later, she heard Min-Jae's footsteps. He entered the hallway. He saw Elena, and his expression immediately softened. You're late. I'm sorry. Elena smiled. Do I look appropriate? Min-Jae looked her over. Perfect. That single word hurt Amara more than she expected. She was standing only a few feet away, and he hadn't even looked at her. Not once. Elena slipped her arm through his. Then she noticed Amara. Your wife won't mind? Min-Jae finally looked at Amara. Their eyes met. His expression remained unreadable. She's not coming. Amara swallowed. She had expected cruelty. She hadn't expected the emptiness in his voice. As if her absence didn't matter. Elena smiled. Then we should go. Min-Jae nodded. He walked past Amara. But as he reached the staircase, he stopped. Something made him turn. Amara was still standing there. Their eyes met again. For one brief second, Min-Jae saw something different in her expression. She wasn't begging. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She simply looked. Finished. He frowned. Are you sure you're staying home? Amara smiled. A small, strangely peaceful smile. Yes. Min-Jae stared at her. Fiend. He turned away. Elena followed him. The front doors opened. Cold air rushed into the mansion. Then the doors closed. Amara listened to the sound of the cars leaving. 1, 2, 3, until the mansion became completely silent. She waited. Then she walked back in her bedroom. She closed the door. And for the first time in 3 years, she stopped trying to become the woman her husband wanted. Amara walked to the bottom drawer of her wardrobe. She pulled it open. Inside was a black garment bag. She had never worn what was inside. Not because she didn't want to, because she had been waiting for a night when she would feel worthy of it. Her fingers slowly pulled the zipper downward. She stopped breathing. Inside was a breathtaking black gown. It was elegant, simple, timeless. The fabric moved like water when she touched it. Her grandmother had left it for her, along with a handwritten note. Amara had never opened the note. Tonight she did. Her grandmother's handwriting was delicate. My child, there will come a day when someone tries to convince you that you are not enough. When that day comes, do not fight to prove them wrong. Simply become everything they were too blind to see. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She smiled. Then she whispered, Tonight. She stood and began getting ready. At the Seoul Grand Imperial Hotel, hundreds of guests had already gathered. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the ballroom. Waiters moved between tables carrying champagne. Cameras flashed. Music played softly. Then the entrance doors opened. Kang Min-Jae walked inside. Elena Park was on his arm. Immediately, cameras turned toward them. Mr. Kang. Min-Jae. Over here. Look this way. Is that Elena Park? Min-Jae smiled. It was the perfect public smile. Controlled. Confident. Powerful. Elena leaned closer to him. You seem pleased. I am. You know everyone is talking. Let them. She smiled. You really don't miss your wife. Min-Jae's smile disappeared for a fraction of a second. No, but the answer came too quickly. Elena notichid. She didn't comment. Inside the ballroom, people began approaching him. Chairman Choi, Directoran, the Leaf family, the Park family. Powerful men who had spent years trying to gain access to Min-Jae's inner circle. Everyone wanted his attention. Everyone wanted to be photographed beside him. And tonight, he had everything he thought he wanted. A beautiful woman, a perfect suit, a powerful reputation. But then Chairman Choi approached him. The elderly businessman smiled. Min-Jae, Chairman. The old man looked toward Elena, then back at him. Your wife has changed. Min-Jae's expression froze. What? I haven't seen her in months. Min-Jae said nothing. Chairman Choi smiled knowingly. Perhaps she will surprise us tonight. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. She isn't coming. Chairman Choi raised an eyebrow. Are you certain? Yes. Then, the ballroom doors opened. The music continued for another 3 seconds. Then slowly, People began turning. One table, then another, then the entire ballroom. A woman stepped through the doors. She wasn't surrounded by bodyguards. She wasn't accompanied by a celebrity. She wasn't announced. She simply walked inside. Her black gown moved elegantly around her. Her natural curls were styled beautifully. Her silver cross rested against her chest. Her makeup was subtle. Her posture was different, confident, calm, unapologetic. Whispers began spreading. Who is that? She's beautiful. Do you know her? Wait. Someone gasped. Isn't that? Min-Jae turned. His entire body went still. The color seemed to drain from his face. Elena's smile disappeared. Chairman Choi stared. And then the chairman whispered the words that would haunt Min-Jae for a very long time. Min-Jae. He looked at him. Who is that woman? Min-Jae couldn't answer, because he knew exactly who she was. It was his wife, Amara, the woman he had left at home, the woman he thought would stay hidden, the woman he believed couldn't compete with Elena. But she wasn't walking into the ballroom like a woman seeking her husband's attention. She walked like a woman who had finally realized she never needed it. And then Amara lifted her eyes. She saw Min-Jae. She saw Elena standing beside him. She saw the cameras. She saw everyone staring. But instead of looking hurt, she smiled. A calm, confident smile. And that was the moment Kang Min-Jae realized something terrifying. For 3 years, he had believed he was the one holding the power in their marriage. But tonight, for the first time, he wasn't sure. For several seconds, Kang Min-Jae couldn't move. The ballroom was filled with hundreds of people, but somehow the only person he could see was Amara, his wife, the woman who had once waited for him at home until midnight, the woman who used to smile whenever he walked through the door, the woman he had slowly pushed into the background of his life. And now, she was standing in the center of the most important room in Seoul, looking completely different, not because she had become someone else, but because she had finally stopped trying to become someone else. Min-Jae's fingers tightened around his glass. Elena notichid. Min-Jae. He didn't answer. She followed his gaze. When she saw Amara, her expression immediately changed. That's your wife. Min-Jae finally spoke. Yes. Elena started. For the first time that evening, she didn't have a clever response. Amara began walking forward. Every step was calm, measured, confident. The ballroom seemed to make room for her without anyone consciously deciding to move. A wealthy woman whispered to her husband. Who is she? I don't know. She's stunning. Wait, I think she's Kang's wife. What? The whispers grew. Min-Jae heard everyone, and each one seemed to hit him harder, because these were the same people he had spent years trying to impress. The same people he had convinced himself would laugh if they saw Amara beside him. But now they weren't laughing. They were staring, admiring, wondering, and suddenly Min-Jae felt something he hadn't expected. Pride, then shame, because he realized he had been proud of the wrong woman. Amara stopped several feet away from him. Min-Jae looked at her. Neither spoke. Elena's arm was still linked through his. Amara's eyes briefly dropped toward it, then returned to his face. She smiled. Good evening, husband. The word made Min-Jae uncomfortable. Not because she said it angrily, because she said it peacefully. Amara. She tilted her head. Yes. What are you doing here? A few people nearby turned to listen. Amara smiled. I was invited. Min-Jae frowned. By who? She glanced toward Chairman Choi. The old man smiled. By me. Min-Jae stared at him. You invited my wife. Chairman Choi chuckled. Of course. Then he looked at Amara. I've been wanting to meet her properly for a long time. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. She doesn't usually attend these events. Amara interrupted gently. That's true. Then she looked at Elena. Apparently tonight, my husband needed someone else. A few people nearby exchanged uncomfortable looks. Elena's face digtenet. Min-Jae's eyes narrowed. Amara. She looked at him. Yes. Can I speak with you privately? She smiled. Of course. But before he could lead her away, Chairman Choi spoke. Actually, Min-Jae, there's no need. The room went quiet again. The old chairman looked at Amara. Mrs. Kang, I've heard you studied architectural design. Amara nodded. I did. Is it true you worked on the restoration project in Busan? Amara hesitated. Yes. Chairman Choi smiled. I thought so. Min-Jae's eyes narrowed. You knew about that? The chairman laughed. I know quite a lot about your wife. Apparently more than you do. Several guests chuckled. Min-Jae didn't. Amara lowered her eyes. She had never told him about the project. Not because she wanted to hide it, but because every time she tried talking about her work, Min-Jae had been too busy. He'd tell her, we'll talk later. Or, I'm dealing with something important. Or simply, you wouldn't understand. So, eventually, she stopped trying. Chairman Choi continued. That restoration project saved the city millions. Amara smiled politely. It was a team effort. Don't be modest. The chairman turned toward the crowd. Do you know how difficult that project was? People began listening more carefully. Amara shifted uncomfortably. She didn't like being the center of attention. But Chairman Choi wasn't finished. Mrs. Kang personally redesigned the Eastern Structural Plan after 3 senior architects said the building couldn't be saved. A murmur moved through the room. Min-Jae stared at Amara. You did that? She looked at him. Yes. When? 2 years ago. His expression changed. 2 years. He hadn't known. Chairman Choi laughed. She didn't tell you? Amara gave a small smile. I didn't think it mattered. The words landed harder than an insult. Min-Jae looked away. Elena watched him carefully. She was beginning to understand. This woman wasn't some ordinary housewife who had suddenly dressed up for attention. There was something else beneath the surface. Something Min-Jae himself apparently hadn't bothered to discover. A waiter approached Amara with champagne. She shook her head. Water, please. The waiter nodded and walked away. Elena looked at her. You don't drink. Sometimes. Elena smiled. I thought women in your position usually enjoyed these events. Amara looked at her calmly. I suppose it depends on the woman. Elena's smile disappeared slightly. Min-Jae noticed. Enough. Elena looked at him. I was only asking. Amara smiled. It's fine. Then she turned toward another guest who had approached. An elderly Korean woman. Mrs. Kang. Amara smiled. Yes. I've seen your work. Amara's eyebrows lifted. You have? Yes. My son hired your design firm last year. Amara smiled. How was the project going? The woman's face lit up. Beautifully. Soon another person joined them. Then another. Within minutes, Amara was surrounded by people asking about her work. Min-Jae stood several feet away watching. Elena was beside him. But for the first time that evening, nobody was looking at Elena. They were looking at Amara. Min-Jae couldn't understand what was happening. He had spent years thinking Amara was uncomfortable around powerful people. He thought she was shy. He thought she didn't know how to carry herself. He thought she would embarrass him. But now he realized something. She wasn't uncomfortable because she didn't belong. She was uncomfortable because she didn't care about pretending to belong. And somehow, that made everyone respect her more. A young businessman approached her. Mrs. Kang, would you be interested in consulting on our new hotel project? Amara smiled. I'd be happy to hear the proposal. Min-Jae's head snapped toward them. The businessman continued. We've been trying to contact your firm for months. Amara laughed softly. Then, I'm sorry you had to wait. It's worth the wait. Min-Jae's expression darkened. Not because the man had spoken to his wife. Because he suddenly realized how many people knew about her accomplishments. How many people respected her. How many things she had accomplished without him. And he knew none of it. A strange feeling tightened inside his chest. Jealousy. He didn't like it. Not one bit. Then Elena leaned toward him. She's good. Min-Jae looked at her. What? Your wife. He said nothing. Elena watched Amara across the room. She's much more interesting than I expected. Min-Jae's jaw tightened. Don't. Elena smiled faintly. I'm only telling the truth. Then she whispered. You're the one who underestimated her. Min-Jae looked at her sharply. But Elena had already walked away. Across the ballroom, Amara was speaking with Chairman Choi. He leaned toward her. May I ask you something? Of course. Why did you come tonight? Amara looked across the ballroom. Her eyes found Min-Jae. He was watching her. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither looked away. Then Amara turned back toward Chairman Choi. I suppose I wanted to see something for myself. What? She smiled faintly. Whether I still belonged here. The chairman studied her. And Amara looked around the ballroom. People were laughing, talking, watching her. Then she smiled. I think I do. Chairman Choi nodded. Good. He raised his glass. Because, Mrs. Kang. He paused. I don't think this room has seen the real you yet. Amara's expression became thoughtful. Neither of them noticed the man standing several meters away. A man who had been watching the entire conversation. A man whose expression was becoming increasingly hostile. Min Tae-hoon, Min-Jae's oldest rival, and the one person in the ballroom who understood exactly what Amara's sudden popularity could mean. Because Tae-hoon knew something Min-Jae didn't. He knew who Amara's grandmother had been, and he knew why Amara had inherited something far more valuable than money, something that could change the balance of power in Seoul. Tae-hoon smiled. Interesting. Then he lifted his phone and sent one message. She's here. A reply came almost immediately. Does Min-Jae know? Tae-hoon looked across the ballroom. Min-Jae was still staring at his wife. Tae-hoon smiled. Not yet. And that was when the real game began.